Roll up for another video tour of the long-forgotten past. Going deep into history is one of the things we do best on this channel, and we do it by examining some of the most perplexing and amazing archaeological discoveries ever made. We've got plenty of them to look at, so let's waste no more time and get on with it. We got a rare and precious insight into the origins of the human species in September 2022, when a 1.8 million year old human tooth was discovered in the European nation of Georgia. The discovery cements the idea that Georgia was home to some of the earliest human settlements in Europe, and perhaps the oldest in the whole world outside of Africa. Archaeologists found the jaw tooth, which belongs to an early human species, in the tiny village of Kvemo Orotsmani, which is in Georgia's Dmanisi municipality. Amazing discoveries have also been made here in the past, including the discovery of a human skull more than 1 million years old in the late 1990s. This might have been the first place humans settled after leaving Africa, but the tooth is still considerably younger than the oldest ever discovered. That honor goes to a partial jaw that was discovered in Ethiopia several years ago, for which scientists were able to demonstrate an age of 2.8 million years. Still, this is a discovery that has the potential to alter our understanding of the earliest years of human development and spread. Until September 2022, we thought that the necropolis of Castillo de Huarmey in Peru was reserved for ancient Peruvian royalty, specifically the rulers of the Wari culture. We now know that exceptions were sometimes made, as archaeologists in the region have discovered the tombs of elite-level Wari craftspeople inside the necropolis. The Wari culture lived in this part of Peru, close to the south-central Andes, between the 5th and 10th centuries, and had a complex hierarchical structure to their society. The tombs of craftspeople have never been found in the necropolis before, and their presence is making Peruvian historians wonder whether Castillo de Huarmey might have been an administrative and cultural center as well as a necropolis. It's possible to identify the newly discovered burials as craftspeople, 2 of whom were male and 2 were female, because of the grave goods they were buried with. One of the graves, that of a man who passed away close to the age of 40 around 1,300 years ago, contains knives, saws, axes, and a cane used in the basket weaving process. It's possible that the craftspeople worked directly for the royal family, but that alone wouldn't explain why they're buried in a royal graveyard. We can always rely on Egypt to provide us with a constant stream of archaeological discoveries, and here's a real slam dunk. It's the largest embalming cache ever found in the country, and it's been discovered at Abu Sir. Experts from the Czech Institute of Egyptology at Prague's Charles University have been at the site for some time, excavating a 26th dynasty cemetery. But to their immense surprise, they found the tools used to mummify the people buried here as well as the remains of the people themselves. It seems that after the work was done, the cache was deposited in a large shaft in the westernmost corner of the cemetery. It's made up of over 350 pottery storage jars containing the residues and remnants of various embalming materials, bunched together in 14 distinct clusters. Some of them are puzzling. Archaeologists have found 4 matching limestone canopic jars bearing inscriptions identifying them as belonging to Wahibri Meri Naith, son of Lady Ertuğrul and the military commander of Egypt's Foreign Legion. Despite the clear dedication, it doesn't seem that the jars were ever used. Perhaps Wahibre Meri Neith was seriously ill and expected to die, but subsequently recovered, or perhaps his relatives weren't happy with the quality of the work. In early 2020, the construction of a new sports complex was planned for the Italian town of Corinaldo. An archaeological survey was carried out before construction work began, and that's how one of the most remarkable Iron Age tombs in Italian history was discovered. Archaeologists don't know the identity of the man who was buried in the tomb, but based on the style of the burial and the objects in the grave, which include a chariot, they're fairly sure that he was royal. They think he might have been a prince, and they're not ruling out the idea that he could have been a king. If so, he'd have been a king of a Piceni culture tribe. Very little is known about the Piceni, save for the fact that they lived on Italy's Adriatic coast and were trading partners of the ancient Greeks approximately 2,700 years ago. They were attacked and utterly decimated by the Romans in the year 286 BCE, resulting in the loss of their culture and their near erasure from history. In the prince's grave were a bronze helmet, a bronze scutula, iron skewers, multiple weapons, and well over 100 ceramic vessels. It's a grave fit for a king, and perhaps that's exactly what it was. The ancient site of Chan Chan in Peru has already given us so many wonderful archaeological artifacts, including what might be the world's first telephone. But in July 2022, researchers at the site struck gold again when they found a beautiful ancient wooden sculpture. This was once the capital of the ancient Chimu Kingdom, which first appeared during the 9th century after the disappearance of the Moki culture. Chan Chan went on to become one of the biggest pre-Columbian cities in South America. Although nobody knows for sure, its name is thought to derive from the Qingnam word for sun, so Chan Chan is Sun Sun. This tiny but amazingly well-preserved sculpture is only 17 inches long, with a flat red oval face and almond-shaped eyes that may once have been covered with plates made from mother-of-pearl. Experts think it's an early Chimu relic and could be more than 1,000 years old. Its purpose is unknown. It could be anything from a votive offering or a ritual object to a sculpture made by a Chan Chan-based hobbyist demonstrating their skills. Just off the east coast of Northumberland in the British Isles is a tiny island known as Lindisfarne. It's been occupied for thousands of years and has been the site of some of the most remarkable discoveries in British archaeological history. In June 2022, Lindisfarne came up with the goods again when a team found the oldest example of medieval prayer beads ever to be discovered in the British Isles. The tiny beads are made from fish bones, specifically the bones of salmon. Lindisfarne is also known as Holy Island on account of the fact that there was once a large monastery on the island, and that access to the island was off limits for anyone who wasn't a priest or otherwise associated with the monastery. The person that the prayer beads were found buried with was almost certainly a priest or a monk, and prior to his discovery, he'd lain undisturbed for around 1,200 years. The beads were found around his neck, suggesting that they'd been worn as a necklace. There's a natural hole in the middle of the salmon bones as they're all vertebra, but it appears that the holes have been artificially widened to make them easier to thread. Why salmon bones were selected ahead of all the other materials that would have been available to the island's residents is unknown. Templo Mayor has already given us many fantastic ancient artifacts over the years. It was once the heart of a huge religious complex in the Aztec city of Tenochtitlan. What's left of it is now an archaeological site in Mexico City. Experts and archaeologists have been digging through the site for decades and will continue to do so for several decades more. But in June 2022, they confirmed the discovery of more than 2,500 wooden objects believed to have been left at the site as religious or ritual offerings. There's no set pattern to the objects. They include figurines, headdresses, masks, jars, earrings, and scepters, all of which were probably deposited by priests during the 14th century as a means of consecrating the Templo Mayor to the gods that the Aztecs believed in. It's rare for wooden objects to survive for so many centuries in such good condition. But in the case of these artifacts, it seemed they were preserved by a combination of the high level of humidity in the region and the anaerobic conditions in the soil. The British government is in the process of building a new high-speed railway network called HS2. This process involves digging up parts of the country that archaeologists have never dug up before, and so some remarkable things are being discovered as work continues. As proof of that statement, here's the largest Anglo-Saxon burial ground ever to be discovered in England. It was found in Wendover, Buckinghamshire, and contains 138 separate graves, along with a further 141 inhumation burials and 5 cremation burials. 3/4 of the graves contain artifacts that can be reliably dated to the 5th and 6th centuries, but there's some evidence that the site was first used for burials as long ago as the Neolithic era. The largest number of items found in a single grave was discovered within the burial of a female. The quality of the goods she was laid to rest with suggests that she was a queen or held a similar position of authority. The finest of those items is a pale green glass bowl, which may be of Roman heritage, and so would have been antique by the time she was buried in the 5th century. In the 1960s, a priceless Mayan temple facade was stolen from the jungle in Mexico and shamelessly offered to the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. As of June 2022, the piece is back in the hands of the Mexican Cultural Federal Bureau Instituto Nacional de Antropología e Historia, and they're restoring it in the hope that it might one day be possible to exhibit it to the public. The 30-foot-long stucco relief has been damaged during its years away, including the introduction of a polymer that was probably introduced by the traffickers in a fudged attempt to preserve it. The original material was damaged in the process, but the team working on the project hoped to salvage as much of the original frieze as possible. There's some debate over what the frieze represents. It might be the Mayan god of maize, but it could also be a portrait of a Mayan leader wearing his feathered headdress. Prior to being stolen from the jungle of Campeche in 1968, it's thought to have been buried deliberately by the Mayans, somewhere between the 5th and 6th centuries. The fact that it was buried probably had significance, but we have no idea what that significance might have been. Sticking with the topic of the Mayans, the severed head of a Maya maize god was found in Palenque in May 2022. The discovery was again made by archaeologists from the Instituto Nacional de Antropología e Historia, who were working at a site close to the Usumacinta River in Chiapas. Palenque is already known among historians and archaeologists for having some of the finest ancient architecture and bas-relief carvings from the Mayan period ever discovered. The severed head is made of stucco and had been deliberately deposited in a small pond. Experts on Mayan culture and beliefs think that the pond was intended to replicate the entrance to the Mayan underworld. One of the culture's fundamental beliefs was that the universe was divided into 3 regions: the sky, the earth, and the underworld, and travel between the 3 was possible via portals. While this sculpture was designed to look like a head that's been forcibly severed from a body, it's unlikely that there was ever a full-sized statue that it was cut from. Instead, it was likely conceived and built as a severed head, and then mounted on a tripod before being positioned in an east-west position in the hope of stimulating maize growth. Our next stop is in western Turkey, where archaeologists in the city of Izmit confirmed in May 2022 the discovery of a sarcophagus with a fascinating inscription. The text etched into the surface of the sarcophagus identifies it as the casket of a protector of the divine flank. This was one of the highest officer ranks in the ancient Roman Imperial Guard, and makes this just the 8th sarcophagi of someone of such rank ever to be found. It's also the first ever to be found in Turkey, and the only one still in possession of grave goods and the bones of its occupant. The sarcophagus was found during an archaeological survey carried out before the construction of a new building for the local water and sewage administration. The same excavation has already turned up 51 Roman burials inside a necropolis, although none quite so grand as this one. The full inscription reads, "To the spirits of the dead, I, Tiampo, protector of the divine flank, restore my monument. I originated from Dacia Minor and lived for 50 years. Nobody else is permitted to be deposed here except my son Severus or my wife." It looks like Tiampo partially got his wish, as nobody else was buried near him at all. There are so many ancient wonders buried in the ground in Turkey that illegal digging has become a problem there. Smugglers dig up artifacts and then try to sell them on the black market. But if we're lucky, Authorities pick the objects up before they're sold and recover them. That was the case with this stunning 1,800-year-old marble bathtub, which was recovered from the country's Caracasu district in April 2022. It's now in the hands of the Aphrodisias Museum Directorate. The bathtub, which is decorated with reliefs of a lion's head, is thought to be unique in Turkey because it's entirely made from marble. It weighs more than 1 ton and is just over 6 feet long. Historians have speculated that it may have belonged to a wealthy business person or state administrator. It's around 2,100 years old, dating back to a time when the people of Aphrodisias were extremely wealthy. The entire ancient city is on the UNESCO World Heritage List. The city had many public and social baths, but this one would have been contained within a private residence and would have been reserved for the use of whoever owned it. It will eventually go on display inside the museum that's taken ownership of it.
Subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and enjoy watching new videos on my channel. Thanks for watching, and see you soon!